Hey there, lovelies. Welcome to our live on barking in the garden and how to resolve it. I hope everybody's well. I hope the weather's great wherever you are. It's quite sunny where we are today. And so, yeah, the reason I'm doing this training and I'm putting this together is because we are going through this exact problem ourselves. Okay, we are having a little bit of a hoo-ha, particularly with Arlo barking in the garden. And the reason for that is because we've just moved. And moving has created quite a lot of anxiety and quite a lot of stress. So the buckets are really full and their arousal level is really high, which makes them very, very trigger happy, if you will. So they hear something, bark, they see something move, bark, because they're constantly worried and they're constantly in this high state of arousal. So I thought I would put this together and go through it with you because I can feel your pain. And I'll show you how I'm trying to resolve it, and I'll show you what I'm actually doing to resolve it for my dogs. Now, Chihuahuas do like a bark in the garden because gardens are quite exciting, and Chihuahuas are very hypervigilant dogs. They have to be hypervigilant. When you're only 10 inches off the ground, you have to keep your eyes open on what's going on. But that hypervigilance can create excitement and anxiety, which then creates this very, very trigger happy kind of action. Every time they hear something, it's a threat. See something, it's a threat. So they're kind of going to bark at it and they're going to lunge at it, etc. And this is where this behavior is coming from. Okay, so this is how I am resolving this with my dogs. Now, as ever, if you're familiar with Chihuahua School and you're familiar with following any teaching I've done, you know that I have a slight, there we go, I have a slight speech impediment. So I do tend to stutter from time to time. And what I've done to try and overcome that is I've created some slides, because slides help me stay on track, and then I don't panic, and then I don't start to stutter. So I am just going to add my slides to the stage. Okay, so again, if you know me from Chihuahua School, you'll have heard me say this, okay, over and over, is we do not work in the situation or in the problem, we work for the problem, okay? Now, what I mean by that is we're not trying to fix something while they're performing that behavior. So let's imagine your dog is running the fence. We're not going to try and train them not to run the fence while they're doing it. And the reason we're not going to do that is because when they're performing these behaviors, they're in a really high state of arousal. Their amygdala has control of the situation, and they are not going to be in a learning headspace. It's like trying to teach a child that's having a tantrum. It's like the children's party when you know there's going to be tears before bedtime, but because the amygdala eventually just takes over and the dog cannot think and they cannot function in any kind of normal way. It's all about instinct. So we never try and train our dog in the situation. We work for the situation. We build the skills our dog needs for the situation. Okay, so what I want you to do is we focus on the behaviors you want and we grow these, okay? Rather than focusing on what your dog is doing, we look at the skills our dogs need to create the behaviors we want, and we grow those in the background, and then we transfer them into a real life situation. Now, a little bit of prior learning that you might need and to do with your dog before you start this training is they're going to need to learn some games to play in the garden. Okay, now these are some simple games that we have in Chihuahua School. If you don't have access to Chihuahua School, I'll show you a couple of them. Spins, for instance, are really easy to teach a dog. Okay, there must be hundreds of YouTube videos on that, but teaching your dog to spin left and right is a nice joyful game for a dog to play. It stretches out their muscles. It's kind of it reduces tension. So spins are really nice. Okay, scatter feeding is basically just throwing food on the floor and letting your dog hunt for it. Scatter and point, I'm going to show you how to play, and I'm going to show you the calming cue. Now, games that switch on the seeking system, I'm going to explain what that means a little bit further into this presentation. Cardboard stack treasure hunts is just basically piling at some cardboard boxes and bits of recycling, baiting it with food, and then letting your dog hunt for it, okay? Because these are games that switch on the seeking system, okay? So I know I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go. Now, some equipment you're going to need is you're going to need an indoor harness, a comfortable harness that your dog is going to be able to wear pretty much all day to start with, okay? These little mesh ones are quite useful for that. They're also going to need a puppy line. Now, I'm talking puppy line, not long line, and certainly not retractable leads. If you walk your dog on a I could nag you for hours about retractable leads. If you walk your dog on a retractable lead, stop it, because they're really dangerous and they just don't teach your dog anything. But don't get me on my soapbox about that. So we're looking for an indoor harness and a puppy line. Now, a puppy line is longer than a standard lead, but nowhere near as long as a long line. And it's very lightweight and they're very thin, okay? Not as thin as a retractable lead, but they're only like 2 centimeters thick, okay? So your dog isn't dragging something really heavy around. The other things you're going to need is a snuffle mat and a lick mat or something that will do the same as, okay? You can buy these from Amazon, or the snuffle mats you can actually make. So you're going to need those equipment-wise, okay? Plus, you're also going to need whatever equipment that you need to, as we get into managing your dog situation, and I'll explain as we go through what I mean by that. Okie dokes. So, first of all, I want to do a little overview of seeking and avoidance, because you will hear me talk about the seeking system and the avoidance system, okay? Now, like us, dogs have an amygdala and they have a prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is higher level thinking, and the amygdala is our drama almond. Okay. Now, alongside these, they also have a seeking and avoidance system. A seeking system is kind of driven by the prefrontal cortex, and the avoidance system is driven by the amygdala. So the avoidance system is going to be your dog barking and lunging and getting things to stay away from me, bark, 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 lunge at it, chase it, even to the point of running up to another dog and getting in that dog's face. That's all avoidance, okay? At no point is it your dog trying to protect you, okay? I hear this so often, that you go out for a walk with your Chihuahua and he bark, bark, bark at another dog, or he bark, bark, bark at a person, and the person goes, "Where's my dog?" and he's trying to protect me. He really isn't, okay? Give a toss about you. Probably doesn't even know you're there, okay? What your dog is doing is he is in avoidance system and he wants that object to stay away from him. And that's how dogs deal with it, okay? So we need to stop this narrative that kind of makes it okay for them to behave like that. He's protecting me. He's dominating the other dog. He isn't dominating the other dog. He just wants the other dog to stay away from him. And rather than just stay under the radar, bud, they don't do that. They come out swinging, okay? And they don't think they're a Rottweiler. They really, honestly, I hear that so often. It's all based in fear, okay? So let's just scotch that narrative now. Now, in order to get our dog to be calmer in the garden and not responding to all these triggers, we need to flip them from avoidance, which is what the system that they're in when they're doing that, to seeking. Now, seeking is about pleasure. Seeking is about thriving, okay? And the way we build that with our dog is we use things that dogs like to do. They like to sniff. They like to hunt. They like to scavenge. So we use these things that our dog likes to do to flip them. It's entirely possible to cue that so that you can flip your dog. You can flip your dog from avoidance to seeking, and I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later on, okay? So it's all about confidence, it's all about calmness, and it's all about getting your dog into a positive mindset. Okay, so another thing we need to think about before we actually start the training proper is stopping rehearsal, okay? Now, in order to stop rehearsal, we need to start to manage the situation. Now, what that actually looks like is, and I'll show you what we're doing to manage our garden to help prevent Arlo from this crazy barking that he's kind of got himself into. You're going to maybe create visual barriers. Sorry, again, words not coming out. you're going to create visual barriers, okay, so that they're not triggered by things that they normally might bark at. You might prevent access to something, again, an area of the garden that creates concern. So maybe you have a fence or something that your dog will run straight up to, and they'll start chasing and running up and down or barking through the fence. You will prevent access to that fence so they cannot continually rehearse the behavior. And we're also going to be using a puppy line and harness here as well. And I'll explain a bit more about that as we go. Now, we want to prevent them rehearsing behavior, because what a dog does every day will become a default behavior. Okay, they take the view that barking at that kept me alive yesterday, and barking at that will keep me alive today. So, what they did yesterday will inform what they do today. And if we don't put a stop in that will, you can see that we're never going to be able to train out these behaviors. So, the first thing we look at is management. Management is key, but it's not the cure. Okay, it's something that you need to do to prevent rehearsal, but it isn't something that is just going to resolve the problem on its own. And quite often people get a bit fed up because they put management in place and then they don't bother with any other training, and then they get disappointed because they don't get the results that they're looking for. So management is absolutely key, and that will depend on your personal situation and what it is your dog is doing in the garden that's creating these triggers for them. Okay, I'm just going to quick grab a water, just bear with. Okay, so we've just moved into quite an old house, as you can see from the fencing, and our house is terraced. So there are literally 2 flights of stairs to get into our garden from the back door, which when we looked at the house was like, oh, that's really quirky and that's really fun. Can wear a bit thin sometimes, up and down the stairs, but dogs love it, okay, and it's keeping them fit. But the problems we were having, first of all, looking at the back gate, there was a massive gap between the gate and the fence post. So, and Arlo would run up to the fence post and he'd peer through it. And because it's a public field behind our gate, he would bark, bark, bark at anybody walking past or anything he thought might be walking past, because he would start predicting events from any noise that he heard. So the first thing we did to stop him doing that is we covered that up. Okay, so we just used that weed matting, which is kind of comes on a roll. It's a bit like fabric. It's like I don't know. It's just like a fabric that you put down, stops the weeds growing through. It's not that expensive and it's quite flexible, so it's easy to use. So I stapled that to the back gate so he can't see through the gap. Now, obviously, that is personal to our situation, so you would look at yours differently. Now, we have 2 decks in our garden. We have an upper deck and a bottom deck, and they're still quite high up. Even on the bottom deck, they can see over the fence into the field. So they will start barking and lunging, etc., whatever they can see in the field. So the first thing we did there is that we're going to stop that. So we thread some of the matting through so that they no longer have a view over the field. Then, and I think that the third picture is not so clear, but that's wire mesh or hog wire, I think some people call it. And we put that across the back. So Arlo cannot even access the back gate now. He can't even get up to the back gate, because what he was doing was coming down from the back gate, down the stairs. That's a really good agility run, straight down the stairs, running up to the back gate, bark, bark, bark out the back gate. He hadn't even heard anything. Okay, he was just predicting what he thought he might heard and what he thought might be a threat. And that was all because his arousal level was really, really high, and he was really concerned. Okay. So these were the management things that we put in place in order to prevent rehearsal of those behaviors. Okay. And also we are using as well a long line and a puppy line. Now, what we are looking for is we're aiming for our dogs to be calm in the garden. Okay. We're not looking for just 0, because the garden's quite exciting, but we want them to be able to manage and have an appropriate arousal level in the garden. Okay. What we don't want is crazy. What we don't want is eyes wide, eyes dilated, can't think, crazy, barking at everything. We want them to be able to mooch about in the garden, play a few games, and we need them to be able to listen to us, and we need them to be able to think. So one of the things that we need to think about is managing our dog's arousal level, because if our dog is super aroused, they are full of cortisol. If they're full of cortisol, that drops them into fight or flight syndrome, fight or flight system, and they are then naturally going to be super wired to consider everything a threat. Something that they might not worry about if they're feeling calm, if they're full of cortisol and they're in a high state of arousal, they're going to respond to. It's going to be a trigger. Okay, so we're looking for calmness or a more appropriate arousal level. And we do this by managing their arousal level, managing the way they behave in the garden and managing the way they access the garden. And again, this is where our puppy line and harness comes in. Now, one of the first things that we need to look at is the way they go into the garden. Okay. Now, a lot of people do this. Okay. They try and get their dog to be calmer in the garden by getting them to wait at the back door. So they kind of be, the dog will be sat there and they'd be wait, wait, wait. And then they might reward it when the dog waits. But what happens for this is stillness is quite stressful for a dog. Okay. Some dogs find being still quite worrying, and that will push their arousal level up. And also, their brain is in the garden. Okay. So they're waiting there, probably, especially if you're feeding them, they're waiting there, but their brain is elsewhere. Their brain is in the garden. Their brain is chasing a pigeon. Okay. All they want to do is go out and join their brain. Okay. So their arousal level is going up, and you're going, wait, wait, wait. And then you open the door, bang. Okay. Now that to your dog is like a starting gun. So it's ready, steady, go. So you open the door, and then what you get is this. Okay. So you get your dog going, charging out into the back door, into the back garden. They're full of excitement. They're full of cortisol because their arousal level's gone up. And you've let them out the back door, and they've gone charging out into the garden. They're going to chase a pigeon. They're going to bark when they hear the dog down the road bark. They might bark when they hear a car door. They're going to be racing around full of excitement. Okay. So how our dog goes out into the garden is absolutely key. Now, what we want to do is we want to create a more moderate arousal level. We don't want this massive spike from stillness to bang, stillness to excitement, to action. We want we want to blunt those peaks. So we want a wave, okay, if you will, a more blunted wave of arousal. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by getting our dog out the door in a more moderate arousal level. And we do it like this. Okay, so that's the next slide, actually. Okay, so first of all, we will have our dog on a harness and lead. Okay, they no longer have unsupervised access to the garden. It's not forever. So don't feel that you're always going to have your dog on a harness. Okay, so at this point, your dog is going to be on an indoor harness and lead, and that's the only access they're going to have in the garden. Okay, and we'll talk about that as we go through. Sorry, I didn't realize that slide was there. Okay, so this is how we manage how they're going to go out the door. We're going to interrupt this high arousal behavior by creating a more moderate arousal level. Now, we're going to use a lick mat, possibly a snuffle mat, okay, or something that acts in that way, okay? Now, one of the things that we really need to be aware of, Chihuahuas are quite small and they are unbelievably easy to overfeed, and there's nothing sadder than a fat dog. Okay, so, and it takes years off their life. So we need to make sure that the food we're feeding our dog comes out of their daily food allowance. Okay, so anything we're training our dog with must have a decent nutritional profile. We don't feed them with treats. Okay, treats are just full of rubbish. So we use something that has a good nutritional value and that can replace some of their daily food allowance. Now, for the lick mat, you can actually use their food. Even if you feed raw, you can actually use some of their food. But what we don't use when we're training is we don't use kibble. Because if our dog is running about and you're chucking kibble about and your dog is catching food, that can get stuck in their throat and make them choke. So we are using a semi-moist food like chicken. If you can use their dinner, then use their dinner, but always replace whatever you use for training, you take it out of their daily food allowance. And the only way to get that right is to know what your Chihuahua weighs and what you should be feeding them. Okay, and again, we've got a whole module on nutrition in Chihuahua School if that interests you. Okie doke. So to start with, you're going to go out the door and you're going to no, sorry, you're not going to go out the door. You're going to have the door shut. You're going to have a lick mat there, okay? And you're going to have your dog just, it doesn't have to be a lot on there. A little bit of coconut oil is quite good for them. So you could put a little bit of coconut oil on the lick mat, just a little bit to keep them busy. And then while they're doing that, you're going to open the door, okay? Then as they finish their lick mat, they will transition to the snuffle mat. Now the snuffle mat can be moved around. Initially, if your dog charges into the garden normally, it's going to be fairly close to the back door that you're letting them out, okay? So they're going to transition from lick mat to snuffle mat. Now, the reason this is good, one is these are moderate arousal level games, so it's going to bring the arousal level down. And also, because they're scavenging and hunting, these games mimic scavenging and hunting. This is then going to put them into a seeking frame of mind, okay, a positive mindset, so that they're not going out into the garden into this massive high state of arousal. So from this, you will go from lick mat, snuffle mat, and then as the dog becomes more, words not coming, sorry, as a dog becomes more skilled, you move the lick mat further away. So it's, they've got a target for it, okay? You can also do this with scatter feeding. If you haven't got a lick mat, if you haven't got a snuffle mat, you could just do it by throwing a little bit of food on the floor and then moving them out, throwing a bit of food on the grass. It's entirely up to you. So there we go. That's how we use them. So a snuffle mat will then just kind of move further away from the door so they can get further away from the door in a moderate arousal level. Now they are on their harness and lead, okay? Can't stress that enough. So once you've actually got them in the garden, they're on their harness and lead. They obviously, well, not obviously, but they might need to go and do their wheeze and poos. So you're going to allow them to have a mooch around, keeping them on the long line, on the puppy line. You're going to let them do their poos and wheeze. And then you're going to play some games with them, okay? Now, that depends on the games that you've taught your dog. This is a really good one, scatter and point. Now, scatter and point is you lay a trail of food out. You might even want to go out and do this before you take them out into the garden, okay? Because we are working for the situation and not in it. So this would be a designated training, okay? Not just something you do because the dog needs to go out, okay? So you're going to lay out a trail of food. You'll have the dog on a lead. And you take them up to the first bit of food, take it, up to the next bit of food, take it, up to the next bit of food, take it. Okay. So you're teaching them some calmness as they move around, and each stage of that calmness is being rewarded with that bit of food. Okay. So that is basically layering your behavior, shaping your behavior. So every time they're a little bit calm, they get to the next bit, they get to the next bit. Now, as your Chihuahua skills grow, we can then up the game and give that game a level 2, which when you can spread the treats out a little bit more. You walk to the first one, and then you trot a little bit faster to the next one. Take it, and slow down to the next one. Take it. And then what that does is when your dog is moving faster, their arousal level go up. And when they're moving slower, it'll come down again. So you're basically teaching your dog arousal up, arousal down, arousal up, arousal down, without all this massive crazy behavior. So scatter and point is a really nice game to be playing with your dog. You could scatter feed on the garden and just let them have a little scavenge for it. You could be playing some catch with them. Catch is a super game to play with a dog because, again, it's a joyful game. They're focused on you. It's a nice stretch out. So if they're a bit tense from tension, it stretches all those muscles out. And you could also be doing your spins, okay? And there's a whole host of games that you could be playing with your dog in Chihuahua School. So if you're not in, then join us in Chihuahua School. Okie doke. Another really important thing to play with your dog is DMT. Okay, now again, if you know anything about, if you've done any training with me, you'll have heard me talk about this a lot. DMT is a calming cue. It's a word that we build to mean there's nothing to worry about. I've got this, bud. Okay, and it is super powerful. It seems like nothing, and you kind of think, I have no idea that this would work, but it does. Okay, so what we actually need to do is we need some food. We need our dog in a calm state, and you are going to feed them, and you're going to say the word nice. Okay, now I'll show you with, let me just drop that down again, and I'll show you with Beanie Chihuahua, which somebody sent me. How cute is he? So you'll have your dog, Obviously, he's going to be a bit bigger than that. And you're going to feed a nice, okay? Feed and nice. We're not building in a sit. We're not building in a wait. We're not adding anything. Your dog doesn't have to do anything, because anything you build into this is what you're going to get. And that's not what we want. We just want the dog to go, when I hear the word nice, something good happens. So they start to associate the word nice with feeling calm and feeling good. Now you can add a stroke down the back with that, okay? Some dogs don't really like that. Some dogs don't like being touched very much. So that is kind of dependent on whether you feel that your dog needs it. But the word nice will then start to mean something to your dog that it's calm, okay? Now, you might think, okay, that's crazy. How is that actually going to work? But it really is quite powerful. And I use that a lot with Arlo. Now, I know we're talking about being in the garden, but I'll tell you how I use it when we go out. Arlo is a bit chippy with other dogs. He doesn't like other dogs very much. He struggles if another dog comes up to him. But once upon a time, if he was out and he saw another dog, he would chase that dog hard. He would go after that dog hard. But we've worked with him a lot and taught him to pretty much ignore other dog. I see you, none of my business, okay? And the way we built that is using DMT and some other games. But when we're out now, what happens is you see another dog and he'll check with me. He'll literally turn around and look at me and I'll go, nice, walk on. Okay. So what that's told him is nice. You don't need to worry about it. And walk on is basically cue for mind your own business. Okay. So nice, walk on. The dog, okay, I don't need to worry about this. I'll just walk on and do my own thing. Okay. Walk on is his pre-mat cue, which is another training for another day. Okay, so that's how nice we use nice with Arlo. There are for Mika, we might use Mika's a bit of a barker when he hears a noise outside. So we might hear a car door bang and he might go to bark, and I go, Mika, nice boy. And he can't, okay, I don't need to worry about that. Nothing to do with me, not my circus, not my monkeys. Okay, as the expression goes. So that's how you use nice. So what we're doing in this situation is we're taking it into the garden. We build it indoors. Your dog doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to offer you anything, doesn't have to perform anything, and the dog will think you're a vending machine. And that's fine, okay? But you can see why we're using their daily food allowance and not treats, because food is really important. And you can actually just feed them their dinner. As long as you're not handling raw, you can just feed them their dinner and do this. Feed nice, okay? Till the point where that word means something. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build it up by layers. So you can see, you can download this worksheet. You can do it, first of all, in the house. So you might move around the house and do it by the front door, do it by the windows, whatever you need. And once it kind of means something in the house, you then take it into the back garden. Go out there with a coffee and just sit there with your dog and just DMT them to the noises around in the garden. Just DMT them to nothing, so that then eventually when you're out in the garden and you hear the dog bark up the road and you go, hello, nice. And they go, don't need to worry about that. And it starts to lower the arousal down in the garden. And once you've got it working indoors, you can actually take it outside. You can take it to the park. You can take it on a walk. So they might see something that is a bit worrying for them, and it might be a paper bag blowing in the wind. You know what Chihuahuas are like. And you can go, and the dogs are about to set off and bark at it. And you go, it's all right, nice. Don't worry, it's just nice. Okay, I've got that. Don't need to worry about it. Okay, so DMT is a really important calming cue, and it's a really important way for you to communicate with your dog that there is nothing to worry about. But you must build it first, and you must build it in when your dog is calm. Okay, and it also, don't build anything else into it, like a wait or a sit or a paw or anything like that, because that is not appropriate to the cue that we're trying to build. Now, another interesting Chihuahua behavior, and this is one of Prince's, is running the fence. Okay. Now, running the fence is when your dog goes into the garden and they'll start charging up and down at whatever is behind the fence. Okay. They're more charging up and down when there's nothing behind the fence. They just get very engaged with the fence or the gate or whatever, and they can't disengage from it. Okay. And that is very common for Chihuahuas. So the way we deal with that is we grow disengagement. Now, disengagement is about transfer of value, because when they go into the garden, if they're at the fence, that fence has a lot of value. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to build value moving away. There is more value moving away from that object than there is going towards it. Okay. Now, again, I can't stress this enough. You build this with your dog when nothing is happening. Okay. So you have them on their line and their harness. You'll be in the garden around the fence. The dog is in a reasonably calm state. There is nothing happening the other side of the fence. Okay. Nothing to get your dog engaged. And what you're going to do is you're going to have two lots of food, two lots of value food. One is going to be a bit boring and dull. That could be a bit of kibble, could be something horrible that your dog's not that keen on. And you're going to have something really high value. Could be chicken, could be a bit of sausage. Okay, I'm a bit wary about sausage because it's got lots of salt in it, but a little bit of sausage is really high value for a dog. It's got lots of flavour. But a bit of chicken, whatever your dog finds useful, but tend to stay away from cured meats, okay, if you can. So you're up against the fence. You're going to throw a bit of dull food towards the fence and let your dog retrieve it. Now, what they normally do is then they'll spin around and they'll look at you, and you're going to catch that, and then you're going to start feeding your high value food to the dog's mouth as you move away from the fence. Okay, so you're going to keep the food coming. Okay, so you're going to have it in your hand and feed to the mouth as you move your dog away from the fence. Okay, we're not calling the dog away from the fence. We have the dog at our side, so we're going to need to spin round and you feed away to the dog's mouth as they move away from the fence. So you are building more value in coming with you than there is at the fence. So you're building that value away. Then once they kind of get used to that game, so dull towards, and after a while, they won't even go after the dull stuff. And that's what you want. You want them to go, nah, to do this. Okay. And they'll just turn around and they'll just come for the nice stuff. Then you can start to build a word in there. Okay. Or a noise. Now, us, we have a little noise. Can I do it? We go like that, and not everyone can do that. Okay, but we build that little positive interrupter noise in there so that when I make that noise, the dog knows that they can move away from whatever it is they're engaged with. And and quite often they want you to take control of the situation. They don't want to be hyper focused on this thing. They just don't know how to disengage from it. So they want you to take charge of the situation. And this is another helpful thing with having your dog on a puppy line and a harness, is you can just give them a little bit of pressure on the lead and feed and move them away from that. Okay, I'm not talking about dragging them or snapping the lead or anything like that. Okay, just a little bit of pressure, come away, feed. Okay, so that you're moving the value away from the fence. Okay, so that is called disengagement. Now, disengagement is quite a big thing. So another game that you can play is creating an interrupter noise. And again, I've just said our interrupter noise is like that. Okay, and I sometimes go puppy. Now they're all going to come up. And they can be down at the end of the garden. They can be, if I make that noise, they'll come in. Okay, because that noise means something good is going to happen. Okay, now I've built it to the point, even if I've got nothing, they'll come in. Okay, but obviously it's important that you still reward that from time to time, because after a while, if you build it and then stop rewarding them, then they'll just stop responding to it. Okay, so there has to be won't she, will there be some food, won't she? But it has to be high value. Okay, again, if you're whistle training, it's the same principle. It has to be higher value than they're normally worth dealing with. So if you normally train with kibble or something low value, this needs to be high value. And the way we build that interrupter noise is this. I'm just going to use Beanie again. Let's just come away from there. Okay, so you make your noise as the food goes in. So it'd be feed. Okay, really close to your dog. Feed. Okay, and then you're going to get further away, so the dog has to come. Feed, and then you're going to run around the house making that noise, and the dog follow you, and you're going to feed with a really high value something. Okay, could be a bit of steak, could be just something really worthwhile, really worth the dog's while. Okay, and then as they go out into the garden, you're going to run around the garden and go feed and feed, 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 and get the dog to chase you. Okay, so that you're building a huge amount of value around that noise. If you're whistle training, it's the same thing. Okay, whistle training is again is another lesson for another day. Okay, because they are quite often not used correctly, and you end up poisoning your cue. So the summary here is your interrupter noise has to be paired with something a little bit special, okay? A little bit above average. Now, it's really important that we do not use a negative interrupter noise. We are not using horns, those air horn things. We're not using a can of coins, which you so often see that on Facebook groups. My dog's doing this. Well, shake a can of coin at them. Don't do that, because all you're doing is adding more excitement and anxiety into the situation. It makes me mad. Okay, so a positive interrupter noise is a noise that's going to cut through and really mean something to your dog, and then make them respond and turn around and come to you. To start with, always make sure you reward it with something really high value. Okay, you are always, what you're doing is you're transferring value away from what they're doing, because if they are up the end of the garden digging a hole, that has a huge amount of value for them, and you need to have higher value than that. Okay, so your noise has to mean something that means that they'll come away from that, disengage from that, and they'll come up to you. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, don't worry, I've nearly got to the end of this, so if you're desperate to go to the loo or need a cup of tea, I'm nearly there. Another thing that we need to consider is barking, is prediction and routine. Okay, dogs predict. They're unbelievably good at predicting what's going to happen next. They watch you and what you're doing, and they ask themselves, what does that mean for me? Okay, so when you get your harness out, they know it means that we're probably going to go for a walk. If you get your keys out, you're going out, or they're going out with you in the car. Okay, if you go towards the back door, they will know that that means the back door is going to open and that they're going to go out into the garden. Now, depending how they feel about what's going to happen next is going to judge where their arousal level is. So if you're going to go out the back door and they're finding the gardens really stressful, their arousal level is going to go straight up. So what we need to do is we need to break down the picture around things that your dog is predicting. Now, this will be personal to you and your dog and your routines. Okay, so you need to think about what is your dog predicting and how is that affecting their arousal level. And then you need to start to break up those routines. Now, that it actually is a little bit tedious, I'm not going to lie. But if going towards the back door creates, oh my God, we're going out in the garden, or even if you're going out somewhere else, you would walk to the back door, come away. Okay. Or you might walk out the back door, touch the handle, and then come away. You might, if the harness creates excitement, you might pick the harness up, you might move around and put it down somewhere. You might pass it to your partner. Okay. So you're starting to break down the association that when I see this is going to happen. Okay. No, it's not. Okay. Another thing is we all do this. We go, right. Okay. When we've been working at our computer and our dogs go, oh, event, something's happening, and their ears perk up. And usually that noise is accompanied by you going to the fridge to get something or make a cup of tea. And the dogs will know that. Okay. So you can start to look at what your dog is predicting, how that is paying into the arousal level you don't want, and you start to break that down. So you make a list of everything that's a trigger, and then you have to desensitize those triggers. A little bit dull, but really powerful and really useful. Okay, and your triggers will be unique to your situation. So in summary, these are the steps that you're going to go through. Okay, so you're going to teach your dog some basic seeking fun games for the garden. Okay, you are going to look at management on how you can stop rehearsal of these triggers, and you're going to start to look at how you can manage arousal levels and help your dog learn to pick a more suitable arousal level. And you're going to reduce prediction of events and the breakdown of the prediction. So when they think something is going to happen, they're not necessarily correct. Okay, you're going to desensitize noise triggers with a calming cue. That's our DMT. and you're going to have a positive interrupter noise to interrupt behaviors, an interrupter noise that means something. And you're going to grow disengagements from fences and gates with our disengagement games. Now, I've given this to you in a linear way, okay? But dog training is never linear, okay? One day everything can be going great, and the next day it's just a disaster. So you will move through this framework depending on where your dog is. One day you might need to go back and revisit something you did a couple of days ago, or maybe last week. It just depends how it is with your dog. Or you might want to push your dog on a little bit, okay? You might want to stretch where your dog is and just push them into a slightly higher level arousal environment. Now, stretching your dog is not testing, okay? There's a different mindset. Testing means that your dog can fail. Stretching just means we're just going to push the boundaries a little bit more, okay? We don't want our dogs to fail. That's not what we're rehearsing. We're rehearsing success, okay? So in summary, these are the steps that you're going to go through, but you're probably going to go through them in different stages to the way I've laid this all out for you. Okay. So I hope that all makes sense to you. And you're still with me because we've been here quite a while now. Now what I've done is, if you're in Chihuahua school, this will be available in Chihuahua School with the training book as well. So if you're in Chihuahua School already, then this is all going to be available for you with all the games. If you're not in Chihuahua School and you want to visit the training again, you're going to be able to buy this from our website probably in a couple of days. Okay, so you'll have a workable training book and access to this recording so that you can work through this at your own pace and just work with your Chihuahua as you go. Okay, so I hope that's been really useful for you. I hope you've got value out of this. Please put comments in the Facebook group. If you've got any questions, come back to me, and stay in a positive Chihuahua training group, because we do have lives, we do have information that's going to help you train your dog in a positive way and move away from some of this really quite interesting and not very nice training advice that you get given in Chihuahua groups. Okay, so that's it from me. I hope you found value here, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.